today, we have a new trifecta of trifectas. 3 different botnets using 3 separate 0 days, all in one LILIN video recorder.
So Stan, I understand you have a story today about attackers going after the DVRs again.
Another day, another DVR botnet. I guess another DVR DDoS botnet. So basically, NetLab 360, a Chinese security company, in their blog, they're reporting something interesting. So they mentioned that there's a specific manufacturer of video recorders, I think it's called LILIN, and in the past few months, they've observed 3 separate botnets, Chalubo, FBot, and MuBot, all taking advantage of 3 0 days that they've discovered within those DVRs. And important to note here is that the researchers at the security company, they did reach out to the equipment manufacturer earlier in the year, and within a month, the vendor did fix the problem and issued a patch or a firmware update. So if you do have this LILIN video recorder in your environment, it will be a good time to go make sure that your firmware is up to date. So the fun part, what are these vulnerabilities? So one of the vulnerabilities is actually kind of I guess kind of sad because it's hard-coded credentials that exist in the firmware. One is for a root account, and the other is for some other account called report. And using these basically backdoor credentials or hard-coded credentials, you can get into the system. You can modify some configuration files, and this is where the second and kind of third vulnerability is that when you modify those configuration files, there's a job that runs periodically, either the FTP service or the NTP service. Each one of those is considered a separate 0 day, and they'll pick up this malicious config file you've created and basically execute the commands that are in there. So there's also some stuff on the web front end where you can also inject commands. So this combination of command execution, remote, with pre and post authentication, I guess hard-coded credentials, I don't know if you would call that you need authentication. Technically, you need authentication. You just need to know the password. And if you do, you can unfortunately take advantage of it. Now, these botnets or these malware families, what do they do? What's their kind of like actions on objectives? They've previously been reported, both Chalubo, FBot, and MuBot, as DDoS botnets, but they also have other capabilities. They can communicate via like SOX proxy or Tor, things like that, to make it a little bit more complicated to catch them. So I think it's very unfortunate that there's another one of these threats out there that's being distributed, but luckily the researchers were able to work with the vendor, and I would say, unlike other times where we've heard that vendors don't do patches, especially for these vulnerabilities, it seems like this time they did, which is a positive thing. So if you have this LILIN video recorder, definitely check out the firmware update and make sure you apply it so you're no longer vulnerable.
Yeah, it's nice that they've patched this quickly, but do we know how they've communicated this out to users?
That's a very good question, and I think this is another tough thing that I think many software vendors, big and small, have battled for many years. It's not enough to have the patch. It's not even enough to put it in an RSS feed or in a web blog that you have it. How do you get the users to come to you and apply the patch? So I think, that's why I think a lot of new software packages out there these days, they kind of do the auto check. And I feel like web browsers do this a lot now, especially, they'll check the update and they won't even ask you, hey, do you want this or not? They'll kind of install the most recent version of the software. So I don't think that that's the case for these video recorders, unfortunately. But although I'm not sure. But hopefully, I think more of these devices will kind of start moving to that model, just like we've seen in operating systems and just like we've seen with web browsers. If it's something that gets used all the time, perhaps it's better for it to check for an update and apply it automatically, even without too much user intervention. It again depends on the use case. Obviously, can't just have the device reboot willy-nilly, but it's definitely having the device kind of check in is probably better than necessarily asking the user. I know my thermostat does that. It'll tell me when there's an update. So when I want to adjust the temperature, I know it's time for an update, and I have the choice to apply the update.
With these devices, not sure if they auto-update or not, do you know if the vendors supplied instructions and how to with these? Because, some people may find updating firmware difficult.
Yeah, I suspect like most devices that you buy that are like small home office devices, they probably don't come with a lot of great support. I suspect it's very similar to like your router, where you can update the firmware on your router, but let's be honest, how many people know to do that or where to even go for the firmware updates? And I suspect this is very similar, unfortunately. Hopefully, over the next 5 to 10 years, or hopefully sooner, this industry that does the small devices like this, small home office devices or DVRs, they'll kind of go through the same renaissance that regular software vendors had to go, even looking back through like the early 90s, where now they realize they have to make things simpler for the end user, because the end user is just trying to do their thing. They don't have time to be an IT administrator. They just want things to work. So while it might not be perfect today, I am hopeful that within the next few years, some of these vendors really pick up on that to make the internet really a better place for us all.